So Eskom is considering implementing stage 2 load shedding for the next 24 months. The Power Utilities chairperson, Mpoma Kwana, says this will help them to deal with turnaround plans. We're now joined by Cas Coovadia. He's the CEO of Business Unity South Africa. As much has been said about the impact of load shedding on business. Mr. Coovadia, thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. So as we heard from the chairperson of Eskom's board, in the 112 days they've been in office, they've had 50 meetings with various committees. As a board self, they've had 20 meetings amongst themselves. It would appear that this is part of the best they could come up with. Your reaction?
Well, I think that having made an announcement that they'd have stage 2 load shedding for the next 2 years is a way of managing the impact of the load shedding. We've always said as BUSA that load shedding will not come to a stop immediately. Even the president's plan, which we commended, which needs to be implemented with urgency, will only begin to bear fruit in about 2 to 3 years' time, and load shedding will continue for that period. To make an announcement that one recognizes that load shedding will continue for at least 2 years, and that over those 2 years they limit load shedding to stage 2, if they have stage 2 load shedding every day, will help manage the situation, will help business manage the situation a bit better, because there's more certainty as to the stages of load shedding and when load shedding is going to happen. But it obviously doesn't ameliorate the situation. Costs are still there. It impacts on business continuity. It's still a severe impact on small, medium enterprises. But we have to see this within the context of the dire crisis we are in. And this is simply a way of ameliorating the crisis we are in to the extent that it can be ameliorated. And so I think that it would bring about more certainty, and it would help manage the situation and plan a bit better. But the focus should be on doing what we need to do to enable private sector generation of energy far more quickly and far more effectively, to create the environment for that, to sort out Eskom's grid so that it can manage greater amounts of energy generation by the private sector, and to, in 2 years' time or so, to ensure that we do not have load shedding at all.
Mr. Coovadia, how do you allay fears from some sectors of society that believe that the private sector's inclusion in the provision of energy will make it simply unaffordable, especially for the working class in South Africa?
Well, given the price of energy at the moment, given the way Eskom is operating and the fact that the public is having to pay for Eskom's problems, if you look at the consistent applications for rate increases, we don't believe that this will be a situation where business involvement in energy generation will have negative impact on an impact on pricing. The price and cost of renewables has gone down over the last few years. Different forms of energy are being looked at, from utilization of hydrogen to other forms of inputs. And businesses' interaction with government are on the basis that we would certainly work with government and work with Eskom, who will still be a player, to see how best business gets involved, to ensure that we manage costs to the extent that we do not exclude people from provision of energy. And those are all discussions that are ongoing and discussions that need to be had. But there's absolutely no doubt that without business generating energy, and substantial amounts of energy in this country, we will not deal with the energy problem. Eskom cannot do this. It's patently clear. And we need to manage this process in a way that actually takes into account the fact that we have poverty in this country, we have inequality in this country, and we cannot exclude people from access to energy, and business will work with government to manage this as best we can.
Speaking of ongoing discussions and discussions that should be had, the president has been crisscrossing the country, holding a number of meetings with various stakeholders. I do wonder if business has been able to make its representation. If so, what did you put on the table?
Well, the president had a meeting with business last week, Monday, where he briefed business on where they are. We put on the table some points, although we didn't have much time because the bulk of the meeting was taken up by a briefing from the presidency and the ESCOM board and CEO. But we did put on the table, we believe, some urgent emergency measures that could be taken to at least ameliorate the problem in the short term, not get rid of the problem, but ameliorate it, including treasury funding, diesel, rooftop solar, wheeling, and a few others that can be done immediately. And we are awaiting some response from the presidency on that.
Mr. Coovadia, I do wonder, is ESCOM the only focal point for business? For instance, you've got the transport department as well, right, where a few sectors of the society are bemoaning the fact that we hardly have a functional rail network. And so you're finding more trucks on the country's roads, which are putting a burden on the country's roads. And there we're going to be seeing a potential problem. This as many trucks are filing up in Richards Bay to export some top-tier coal in South Africa. And so other sectors that business is looking at holistically and putting that to the president to say it's not just ESCOM that poses a threat.
Yes, we are. I mean, the whole logistics sector, which you refer to now, the whole area of law and order is a critical issue, not just for business, but for citizens in the country and for confidence in the country. Water will become a critical issue if we don't actually start dealing with that. And we have we've done some work on certainly logistics. We're doing some work on law and order, and all this with a view to putting something to government in the next few months, not to identify what the problems are. We know what the problems are,
Yeah.
but to actually put to government that these are the 3 or 4 things you can actually do, critical intervention in each of these areas that will move the dial significantly from an investment point of view and from a cost-saving point of view. And yeah, we are doing work on those sectors, and we will engage government on those.
And before we let you go, just to go back on ESCOM, the president saying, well, NERSA's decision, I'm not in agreement with. Let's make things easier for the everyday person. As we continue to get reaction, I wonder if you've had time to formulate or even if you have a view on this.
Well, I must say I was a bit surprised at the president making that comment. I mean, NERSA has its processes. It went through its process and made its decision. Whether one agrees with that decision or not is a separate matter. But I think that we do need to be careful that we do not flout processes, and we do not flout the roles that particular organizations and regulators need to play, and override those regulators when they arrive at certain decisions. One needs to engage with NERSA, certainly, on the decision they arrived at. But I think for the executive authority to make such a comment and try to get a regulatory authority to change a decision it has arrived at is problematic. And I think that we need to be careful that we don't cross those lines.
CEO of Business Unity South Africa, Cas Coovadia, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. So universities are bracing themselves